My parents ignored me my whole life for my golden sister, until they needed me. But I grew up in a house where I was practically invisible. My older sister, Victoria, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my parents paraded around like some kind of trophy. Meanwhile, I was just there. If I got a good grade, it was expected. If Victoria got a good grade, it was cause for celebration. If I had a hobby, it was cute. If Victoria had a hobby, she was gifted. From the moment I was old enough to realize how things worked, it was clear that Victoria was the priority. She got new clothes every school year while I got her hand-me-downs. Not that they even fit properly. She was taller and had a completely different build than me. But that didn't matter. Be grateful, my mother would say whenever I tried to complain. You're lucky to have a sister who takes such good care of her things. Victoria had the best of everything. A brand new bicycle when she turned 10, mine was secondhand and rusted by the time I got it. Expensive music lessons with a private instructor. I had to make do with whatever after-school program had space left, and the full attention of my parents at every recital, every competition, every minor achievement. I remember one year, I worked for months to save up for an art competition. I loved to draw, and it was one of the few things I felt truly proud of. I needed an entry fee, and I had planned everything. I'd mow lawns, babysit, even skipped out on lunch at school to save money. The day I finally had enough, I was so excited to tell my parents. I came home, ready to share my accomplishment, only to find out they had just spent a ridiculous amount of money on a new violin for Victoria. My mother waved off my art contest like it was nothing. Drawing is just a hobby, sweetheart, she said dismissively. Victoria has a real talent. That moment stuck with me. It was the first time I truly understood my place in our family. When I turned 12, I wanted to take up music too. Maybe, I thought, if I played an instrument I'd finally get the kind of praise Victoria did. But of course, I couldn't get a private instructor. I couldn't even get a properly sized instrument. My parents handed me Victoria's old violin, which was way too big for me. Just make it work, my father said, like it was the easiest thing in the world. I hated playing that violin. My fingers could never reach the right spots, and I sounded awful. Victoria would practice in the next room, effortlessly playing complicated pieces while I struggled just to hold the bow correctly. My parents never cared. Victoria took to it so naturally, they would say. Maybe music just isn't for you. I wasn't jealous of my sister, not exactly. It wasn't her fault our parents treated her like royalty while I was an afterthought. But I did resent the way she basked in it. She never once questioned why she got everything handed to her while I had to fight for scraps. If anything, she leaned into it. Rachel, can you grab me a snack? Rachel, can you iron my concert dress? Rachel, do you mind if I take your bedroom mirror? Mine doesn't have good lighting. And if I ever said no? If I dared to put myself first, even for a moment? You're so selfish, she'd sigh dramatically, and my parents would agree. Why can't you be a supportive sister? I spent my entire childhood and teenage years trying to prove myself, trying to earn even half the attention Victoria got. I tried being the best student, didn't matter. I tried joining clubs, excelling in hobbies, making friends outside of school. But nothing could compete with the dazzling, perfect image of Victoria. Even birthdays were a joke. I remember my 16th birthday like it was yesterday. I was so excited because my parents had finally agreed to let me have a small gathering with a few friends. Nothing huge, just some pizza and a movie night. But guess what happened? Victoria had an important recital the same day, and my parents made me cancel my plans to attend it. I'm sure your friends will understand, my mother said dismissively. Victoria's recital is important. I was 16. She was 25. She was playing at a small, local event that she chose to sign up for, and I had to cancel my birthday for it. That night, I sat in the dark, alone in my room, listening to my parents praise Victoria at dinner. Not a single word about my birthday. Not even an afterthought. That was when something inside me snapped. I stopped trying. Stopped seeking their approval. Stopped pretending like their validation was something I needed to survive. If they weren't going to acknowledge me, fine. I'd learn to be my own person without them. Victoria could have all the attention in the world. But I was going to build a life that didn't revolve around fighting for crumbs. And that's exactly what I did. But of course, that was only the beginning of the real story. Because years later, when things took a turn, when the golden child wasn't quite so golden anymore, suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Suddenly, my parents had plenty to say to me. Victoria was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was the one who had everything handed to her, and I was always just trying to keep up. This wasn't just a feeling, It was the reality of our lives. When it came time for Victoria to go to university, my parents didn't even hesitate. They paid for her education at a prestigious private university, no questions asked. I remember hearing them talk about it one evening, sitting in the living room with my mom saying something like, "We're so proud of her, she's going to do great things." And honestly, I had no reason to doubt it. I was happy for her. I guess I just expected the same for myself when the time came. But no, that wasn't the case at all. When it was my turn, I was told I had to figure it out on my own. My parents didn't offer any help, not even the smallest contribution. I had to find funding, scholarships, and student loans by myself, while Victoria was living it up at this fancy university. I spent weeks filling out forms, applying for anything I could to make ends meet. And then there was the car situation. Victoria was handed a brand new car worth $55,000 as soon as she left for college. I couldn't believe it when they brought it up. My parents proudly announced it one day, casually saying, "We thought it would make things easier for her." To be fair, she probably did need it. She was going to a university that was a couple of hours away, and I understood the reasoning behind it. But that's when the gap between us became painfully clear. I had to rely on public transportation to get to my state college. I was lucky if the buses ran on time, and I had to endure crowded, smelly rides, some of which felt like they would never end. I couldn't even imagine owning a car, let alone one worth thousands of dollars. I had this overwhelming sense of unfairness, watching my sister get everything without even having to ask for it. She was always the star, and I was just the shadow, trying to scrape by while everyone else got what they wanted. It stung, but I never said anything. I didn't want to seem bitter or ungrateful, so I kept my frustrations to myself. I kept going, working extra shifts to make sure I could pay my bills, staying up late studying to make up for the lack of support. But deep down I resented it. I resented how easily everything came to Victoria, how effortlessly she floated through life, while I had to claw my way through every single thing. Looking back, I still can't wrap my head around how unfair it all was. It was as if I didn't even matter to my parents when it came to big decisions. They didn't want to help me, but they threw all their resources into helping Victoria. She got to follow her dreams while I was stuck with the burden of figuring everything out on my own. And the worst part? It wasn't even a conversation. There was no discussion, no offer of help. It was just understood that Victoria would be given the world, and I'd have to fight for whatever I could get. Even now, it's hard not to feel the weight of that disparity. But that's just how it was. That's how they saw us, and no matter how hard I tried, it was clear I wasn't the one they were rooting for. It wasn't even about me being the youngest or anything. It was about them putting all their energy into one child while ignoring the other. Victoria's wedding was treated like the most important event our family would ever experience. For 3 whole years, it was all my parents talked about, all they planned for, all they cared about. Every holiday, every gathering, every random phone call turned into a conversation about the wedding. And guess who got stuck doing all the behind-the-scenes work? Me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't volunteer. But somehow, I ended up being responsible for nearly every organizational aspect. I was making calls, setting up appointments, touring venues, helping Victoria choose everything from flowers to table linens. I was expected to handle logistics, make sure the guests had all the details, coordinate schedules, and basically keep everything running smoothly. If something went wrong, I was the one blamed for it. Meanwhile, Victoria got to be the stress-free bride, soaking up all the attention while I ran around like an unpaid wedding planner. At one point, I tried to push back. I told my mother I had my own life to deal with, my own responsibilities. She just waved me off and said, "Rachel, this is what family does." I wanted to ask if family only meant me making sacrifices for Victoria, but I already knew the answer. And then came the house. After Victoria got married, it didn't take long for her to start a family. When she had her twins, my parents decided it was their duty to make sure she had the perfect home to raise them in. They spent $220,000 as a down payment for her house. Just like that. No hesitation, no second thoughts. They handed her and her husband an entire future on a silver platter. Meanwhile, I was still struggling just to stay afloat, renting a tiny apartment and working long hours just to cover my own expenses. The house was gorgeous, big, spacious, perfect for raising kids. And of course, once she moved in, my role in her life shifted yet again. I became the free babysitter. At first, it was just every now and then, an evening here, a weekend there. But before I knew it, I was practically living at Victoria's house, watching the twins while she and her husband went on vacations, had date nights, or just needed a break. I had no say in it. My parents made it clear that this was helping family, and I was expected to do my part. It started with weekends, then expanded to weeknights, then entire weeks where I was the one making sure they were fed, bathed, and put to bed while their parents went off and enjoyed themselves. And I'm not going to lie, I loved the twins. They were sweet kids, and none of this was their fault. But I wasn't their mother, and I sure as hell wasn't getting anything in return for all the time I was putting in. I was working full-time, barely keeping up with my own life, and yet every free moment was expected to go toward making Victoria's life easier. I wanted to say no, but every time I even hinted at it, my parents guilt-tripped me into backing down. "Rachel, don't be selfish," they would say. "Victoria has so much on her plate and she needs help." As if I wasn't drowning in responsibilities of my own. Looking back, I don't even know why I put up with it for so long. Maybe I was still clinging to the idea that if I just did enough, if I just proved myself, my parents would finally see me as their equal. But of course, that never happened. So yeah, that was my life for years. Victoria got a dream wedding, a house funded by my parents, and unlimited freedom while I became her built-in babysitter. And no one ever stopped to ask if I was okay with it. Because in their eyes, it was just the natural order of things. A few years after becoming my sister's unpaid babysitter, I finally got some good news. My hard work at my job had paid off, and I was offered a promotion. It was a huge opportunity, one that I had worked for years to achieve. It meant better pay, more stability, and a real chance to build something for myself. I was excited, proud, and ready to move forward. But my parents had other ideas. The moment they found out about the promotion, their entire attitude shifted. It was no longer about my accomplishments or my career growth. It was about how my success would affect Victoria. My mother wasted no time telling me that I could not possibly accept the new position because I was needed at home. She made it sound as if I was abandoning my family, as if my entire existence was meant to serve Victoria and her children. "You know how much your sister relies on you," my mother said, shaking her head like I had personally betrayed her. "You cannot just leave her like this." It did not matter that Victoria had a husband. It did not matter that my parents had spent over $200,000 making sure she had a house and everything she needed to be comfortable. In their minds, I was still responsible for making sure everything ran smoothly in her life. At first, I tried reasoning with them. I told them that I deserved to have a life of my own, that I had worked incredibly hard for this opportunity, and that Victoria was more than capable of handling her own responsibilities. But none of it mattered. My parents dismissed everything I said, acting like I was being dramatic and selfish for even considering putting my own needs first. When I started saying no, the manipulation began. It was not just guilt-tripping, it was full emotional warfare. My mother would call me in tears, telling me how exhausted Victoria was and how she could not possibly handle everything on her own. My father would remind me of all the things they had done for me growing up, as if I owed them my entire adult life in return. And Victoria? She played her part perfectly, making sure I knew just how much I was letting her down. "I just don't know what I'm going to do without you," she said during one of our conversations, her voice filled with fake helplessness. "The kids adore you. They're going to be so heartbroken if you aren't around as much." It was never about what was best for me. It was about control. No matter how many times I tried to set boundaries, they refused to respect them. If I said I could not babysit on a particular night, they would show up at my door anyway, dropping the kids off with no warning. If I refused to answer calls, I would get bombarded with messages about how I was tearing the family apart by being so cold and distant. If I tried to take a weekend for myself, my parents would call me selfish and accuse me of abandoning them. Every time I tried to push back, the pressure only got worse, and after years of being treated like the family servant, I was too exhausted to keep fighting. So I gave in. I turned down the promotion. I told myself it was temporary, that I would find another opportunity later, but the truth was that I let them win. I let them manipulate me into staying stuck, into putting my life on hold yet again for Victoria's sake. And do you think they appreciated it? Do you think Victoria or my parents ever acknowledged the sacrifice I made? Of course not. It was just another thing they expected from me, another responsibility that I was forced to take on without complaint. Looking back, I wish I had fought harder. I wish I had been stronger, that I had walked away instead of letting them guilt me into staying in a role I never wanted. But when you spend your whole life being told that your needs come second, that you exist to serve someone else, it is not always easy to break free. So that was my reality. No matter how hard I tried to claim my own life, they always found a way to pull me back in. And the worst part? I let them do it. For years, I had watched Victoria and her husband go on trips, taking breaks whenever they wanted while I stayed behind, making sure everything ran smoothly for them. I was always the one watching the twins, handling emergencies, and putting my life on hold so Victoria could enjoy hers. But after everything, after sacrificing so much, I decided I deserved something too. I booked a vacation to Hawaii. A real vacation. Not a weekend trip, not a last-minute getaway. I planned for months, saved every penny, and found the perfect resort. I imagined myself lying on a beach, drinking something cold, reading a book, and finally being free from my family's endless demand. It was supposed to be my escape, my reward for years of putting everyone else first. And then I made the mistake of telling them about it. I did not even think about it at first. I casually mentioned my upcoming trip during a conversation, expecting nothing more than the usual fake enthusiasm or a dismissive, "That's nice." Instead, my mother's eyes lit up, and before I even had a chance to react, she said, "That sounds like such a wonderful idea. We should all go." I laughed, thinking she was joking. But she was completely serious. Within a week, my parents and Victoria had started making plans as if this had been their idea all along. My sister's husband had work commitments and could not go, so of course, the responsibility of watching the twins would fall on me. My mother even had the nerve to say, "It will be so nice for the boys to have their auntie there. You can help keep them entertained so Victoria can relax." My vacation had been stolen right out from under me. I tried to push back. I told them I wanted time to myself, that I had planned this as a personal trip. But as always, they ignored everything I said. Victoria acted as if she had already booked her flights. My parents talked about all the activities we could do as a family. And every time I tried to protest, I was met with guilt. "Rachel, you know we hardly ever get to spend time together. Rachel, this will be so good for all of us. Rachel, the kids would be devastated if you went without them." I knew exactly what was going to happen. My dream vacation would turn into another obligation. Instead of resting, I would be chasing after Victoria's kids. Instead of peace and quiet, I would be stuck listening to my parents complain. Instead of finally doing something for myself, I would once again be sacrificing my happiness for theirs. So I did the only thing I could think of. I lied. While my family thought I was booking a flight to Honolulu with them, I secretly booked another resort on a remote island. I chose a 5-star resort, one that was exclusive, private, and as far away from them as possible. It cost me $15,000, more than I had ever spent on myself in my entire life, but I did not care. If I was going to escape, I was going to do it right. The night before the trip, I packed my bags as if I were going along with their plans. I acted excited, even joined in on the last-minute group chat where they were talking about their itinerary. And then, before I left, I did one final thing. I turned off my geolocation. No Find My iPhone, no check-ins, no way for them to track where I was. When I landed at my real destination, I turned my phone on just long enough to send a single text. Change of plans. Needed some time for myself. Have a great trip. Then I turned my phone off again. For the first time in years, I was completely unreachable. I spent those 2 weeks doing exactly what I had planned, relaxing on the beach, enjoying quiet meals, swimming in crystal-clear water, and not once worrying about Victoria, the twins, or my parents' endless demands. I had no crying children to watch, no guilt-tripping phone calls, no one telling me what I should be doing instead of enjoying myself. And when I finally turned my phone back on, I was met with absolute chaos. Dozens of missed calls. Furious texts from my mother, demanding to know where I was. Victoria had sent messages ranging from, "How could you do this?" to, "I needed you." My father had left voicemails filled with disappointment, acting as if I had abandoned my entire family. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty. I did not respond. I did not explain myself. I simply packed my bags, checked out of my resort, and went home. When I finally faced them, I let them rage. I let them accuse me of being selfish, of being inconsiderate, of ruining their trip. And when they were done, I simply said, it was my vacation. I chose to spend it how I wanted. For once, I put myself first. And it felt incredible. For the first time in my entire adult life, I woke up in the morning without worrying about anyone but myself. There were no last-minute calls from my mother asking me to run errands for Victoria, no frantic texts about the twins needing to be picked up, no pressure to drop everything because my family needed me. I had complete and total freedom, and I did not even know what to do with it at first. The first few days felt almost surreal. I kept expecting my phone to ring, for someone to show up and remind me that I was supposed to be responsible for everyone else. But it never happened. Instead, I found myself doing something I had never really done before. I started living for myself. I met new people, People who did not know me as Victoria's sister or the family babysitter, people who saw me as my own person. I spent my mornings trying things I had never even considered before. Surfing, yoga, even just sitting on the beach doing absolutely nothing without feeling guilty about it. I laughed more in those few days than I had in years. One night, I even went on a date. It was not anything serious, just a casual dinner with someone I met at the resort, but for once, I felt like I was just Rachel, not the person always carrying other people's burdens. I could not even remember the last time I had done something purely because I wanted to, without considering how it would affect someone else. 3 weeks passed faster than I expected, and for the first time in my life, I was not ready to go home. The thought of returning to my family, to the inevitable confrontation, to their anger and guilt-tripping, was something I had been trying to push to the back of my mind. But I knew I could not stay on that island forever. As my flight home approached, I started preparing myself for what was coming. I knew my mother would be furious, my father would be disappointed, and Victoria would act like I had personally betrayed her. They would demand an explanation, expect an apology, and insist that I had been selfish for putting myself first. But this time, I was not the same person who had left. I was not going to let them manipulate me back into my old role. I had spent 3 weeks rediscovering who I was outside of them, and I was not about to lose that again. So I got on that plane, knowing full well that the moment I walked through my front door, everything was about to explode. I just did not care anymore. My mother was the one who arranged the meeting, choosing a quiet little cafe where she probably thought I would not make a scene. My father was already seated when I arrived, sipping his coffee like this was just another casual family chat. Victoria sat across from him, arms crossed, radiating anger before I even sat down. And next to her was her husband, Nate, looking as uncomfortable as I had ever seen him. The moment I pulled out my chair, my mother let out a dramatic sigh and said, "Rachel, what were you thinking? Do you have any idea how much you hurt this family?" I let her finish, let her get it all out, but I did not say anything right away. I just sat there, watching them, letting the weight of everything I had been holding inside settle. Then I took a deep breath and, for the first time in my life, I told them the truth. I told them how I had spent my entire childhood fighting to be noticed while Victoria was given everything on a silver platter. I told them how I had been forced to organize a wedding that was not mine, how I had watched them hand Victoria a house while I struggled just to make ends meet. I told them how I had spent years as an unpaid babysitter, how every time I tried to say no, I was guilt-tripped, manipulated, and made to feel like a terrible person for simply wanting a life of my own. They stared at me like they could not believe I was actually saying these things out loud. My mother shook her head, still refusing to understand, but it was Victoria who finally spoke. "Family is about sacrifice," she said, her voice dripping with frustration, as if I was too selfish to grasp such a simple concept. I looked her right in the eye and said, "Yes, but it has to work both ways." Silence. For the first time, Victoria did not have a response. I leaned forward and told them exactly what I had realized during my vacation, that they did not see me as an equal, as someone who deserved the same love and support they had given Victoria her entire life. They saw me as a resource, a person they could rely on whenever it was convenient for them. I told them I was done being treated like an employee rather than a family member. That was when I said it. "You do realize you have been treating me like a paid nanny all these years, right?" My mother gasped. My father's expression darkened, like he wanted to tell me I was overreacting. But Nate, the one person I never expected to say anything, was the one who broke the silence. "She's right," he said, his voice low but steady. "We have been using her." Victoria turned to him, stunned. "Nate, what are you talking about?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Rachel has spent years taking care of our kids, giving up her time, her life, while we went out, traveled, had time to ourselves. And we never really stopped to think about what that was doing to her." He looked at me then, and for the first time in my life, I saw actual remorse in his eyes. "I am sorry, Rachel. I should have said something sooner." Victoria looked at him like he had completely lost his mind. She pushed her chair back so fast it scraped against the floor, then stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," she muttered before storming out of the cafe without another word. I expected my mother to chase after her, but she just sat there, stunned, as if she could not believe what had just happened. My father looked down at his coffee, silent for a long time before he finally spoke. "We should have helped you more," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "We should have seen it sooner." But that was it. No real apology, no acknowledgement of just how much damage they had done. Just a vague statement that barely scratched the surface of what they had put me through. I did not push for more. I had already said everything I needed to say. I stood up, picked up my bag, and looked at them one last time before saying, I am not going back to the way things were. Then I walked out. After that confrontation at the cafe, I knew there was no going back. My sister had stormed out, furious that I had dared to stand up for myself. My father had admitted, in the weakest way possible, that they should have done more, but there was no real apology, no genuine acknowledgement of the damage they had done. And my mother, well, she was still in complete denial, acting like this was just a temporary tantrum that I would eventually get over. I made my decision that night. I was done. Within a month, I moved out of my apartment, found a new place in a different city, and changed my phone number. I cut off all personal contact, blocked their numbers, and removed them from every social media account I had. I even updated my work contacts so that my family had no way to reach me. For the first time in my life, I was no longer available to be used, manipulated, or guilt-tripped into putting my life on hold for someone else. And it felt incredible. I started building my own life, the one I should have had all along. I made friends, real friends, people who saw me for who I was, not just as an extension of my sister or a free babysitter. I picked up hobbies I had never had time for before. I started hiking, took a cooking class, and even got back into painting, something I had loved as a kid but had abandoned because it was never seen as important in my family. My career flourished now that I was finally able to put my energy into it without distractions, and I felt more confident and capable than ever before. But of course, my family did not let go easily. At first, it was just calls and texts from numbers I did not recognize, all of which I ignored. Then my parents started reaching out to old friends, trying to get them to convince me to come back. One of them even messaged me saying, "Your mom is really worried, Rachel. Maybe you should just talk to her." I responded once, telling them that my decision was final and that I did not want to be contacted again. Then my mother escalated. One afternoon, I was in the middle of a meeting at work when the receptionist knocked on my office door, looking confused. "Rachel, there is a woman on the phone claiming to be your mother. She says it is an emergency." My heart dropped. For a brief second, I panicked, thinking that maybe something had happened, that maybe one of my nephews was hurt. But then I took a deep breath and reminded myself who I was dealing with. This was just another manipulation tactic, another attempt to force me to respond. I told the receptionist to let my boss handle it. Later, I found out that my mother had told them I was in danger, that she was desperately trying to reach me, and that it was a life-or-death situation. But when my boss pressed for details, she had nothing to say. That was the last straw for me. I had given them every opportunity to respect my boundaries, to let me go and finally live my life. But they refused. They did not care about my happiness, my needs, or the fact that I was finally free. They just wanted control. So I took my final step. I sent a legal notice, warning them that any further attempts to contact me, especially through my workplace, would be considered harassment. My father must have taken it seriously because after that, the calls and messages stopped. My mother did not show up at my office. My sister, as far as I knew, never even tried. And that was it. It has been over a year now, and I can honestly say that cutting them off was the best decision I have ever made. My life is my own now. I wake up every morning knowing that no one is going to call me with another demand, another responsibility that is not mine to carry. I have peace, real peace, and for the first time, I finally know what it means to put myself first. So that is my story. I know not everyone will understand my decision, but I also know that some of you out there will. If you have ever been trapped in a family that only takes from you without giving anything back, if you have ever been told that family is about sacrifice, but only when it benefits them, just know this: you do not have to stay. You do not have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. It was a simple message. No dramatic guilt trip, no desperate plea, just a short and direct invitation. "Rachel, I would like to have lunch." No pressure, just a conversation. Let me know. I hesitated before responding. After everything, I had no interest in reopening old wounds or giving them another chance to manipulate me. But something in me, maybe curiosity or just a need for closure, made me agree. I picked a public place, one where I knew I could leave at any moment if things took a turn. When I arrived, my father was already there, sitting at a small table with 2 cups of coffee, one black and one with cream, exactly how I used to drink it when I lived at home. I did not let that detail soften me. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral, waiting for him to start. For the first time in my life, my father actually listened. He did not interrupt, did not brush my feelings aside, did not try to explain away everything they had done. Instead, he sat there, quiet, as I told him how much damage they had caused me over the years. I told him about the exhaustion, the resentment, the way I had felt like I was nothing more than a tool for Victoria's convenience. I told him how much it hurt to watch them hand my sister everything while I was expected to figure everything out alone. He nodded slowly, staring down at his coffee. "We made a mistake," he said after a long pause. "We should have seen it sooner." It was not exactly an apology, and I knew better than to expect one, but it was more than I had ever gotten before. Then came the real reason for the meeting. After dancing around the topic for a few minutes, he finally got to the point. "Your mother and Victoria have been talking, and they realize now that maybe we did not appreciate everything you did for the family. We want to make it right." I leaned back, already knowing where this was going. "We are willing to compensate you," he continued, choosing his words carefully. $1,500 a week if you are open to helping out with the kids again." I almost laughed. After everything, after all the manipulation and guilt-tripping, after years of treating me like I owed them my life, their solution was to turn me into a paid employee. I took a deep breath, set my napkin down, and shook my head. "No." He looked at me like he had not expected that answer, as if money was supposed to be the magic fix for everything they had done. "Rachel, think about it. This is a fair arrangement. We know you are good with the kids, and this way, you would be compensated for your time." I did not raise my voice, did not let my emotions get the best of me. I just looked him straight in the eye and said, "The problem was never about money. The problem was that you never saw me as an equal, as a person who mattered as much as Victoria. You only cared when I was useful to you. And now that I am gone, you are trying to buy me back." His face fell, and for the first time, I saw something close to regret in his expression. But I did not wait for another weak admission of fault. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and said, "I am done." As I walked away, he did not stop me. That was the moment I knew I had truly won. After I walked away from my father's attempt to negotiate my return, things changed, not for me, but for them. Nate, my brother-in-law, finally started stepping up. Whether it was guilt or the realization that they could no longer rely on me, I do not know. But from what I have heard through mutual acquaintances, he takes on more of the childcare now, picking up the slack that Victoria had always expected me to handle. Victoria, of course, has not changed. She is still playing the victim, still refusing to take any accountability for how things fell apart. I do not follow her on social media anymore, but people have told me that she posts passive-aggressive messages about family betrayal, and how some people do not understand sacrifice. It does not bother me. Let her play the martyr all she wants. It has nothing to do with me anymore. Because I am finally living. Since cutting ties, I have done things I never thought I would. I started traveling. I have seen places I used to dream about but never imagined I would actually visit. I have been to Spain, Mexico, and Argentina, and along the way I started learning Spanish. It started as a way to connect more with the places I was visiting, but now I love it. It is something that belongs to me, not something I am doing for someone else, not something that was handed to Victoria first. Just mine. I started playing sports too. I go to the gym regularly now, I hike, I swim, and I even signed up for a beginner's boxing class just because I wanted to see if I would enjoy it. And I do. There is something so freeing about realizing that I can try things just for the sake of trying them, without worrying about anyone else's expectations. And yes, I started dating. I kept my distance from relationships for a long time because I had spent so many years focused on my family's needs that I did not even know what I wanted. But now, for the first time, I am going into dating as me. Not as someone weighed down by guilt or obligation, not as the person constantly sacrificing for others, but as someone who finally knows her own worth. My therapist called it post-traumatic growth. She told me that when people leave behind toxic relationships, whether with partners, friends, or family, they do not just move on. They grow. They build something better. And that is exactly what I have done. I am not just surviving anymore. I am happy. I am free. And I will never go back.